So Richard, do you know what it takes to construct a green building?
So I can imagine the color of the paint is pretty important.
Haha, seriously, man.
Well, I imagine that there are kind of two disciplines, sustainability and design.
Well, our guest today believes that sustainability and design are not two separate disciplines at all. They are actually integrated parts of a holistic approach.
Wong Mun Summ is a founding director of WOHA, a leading architectural firm. He's pioneering a holistic approach to sustainable design for the 21st century's biggest challenges.
Well, Mun Summ is joining us today to talk about his transformative approach to designing a greener Singapore.
Excellent. Let's do this. Okay, welcome to today's episode of the TransformAsians podcast. Today we have a fantastic guest, Wong Mun Summ, who is one of the founding partners of WOHA, the architectural tour de force that works out of the Singapore market. Mun Summ, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you for inviting. Happy to be here.
Good on you. It's great to get the chance to chat. So we're going to start the episode today by asking you to talk, I guess, a bit about your journey in the architecture industry and how you developed this passion for sustainable design.
I was sort of in the School of Architecture in the 80s. 70s being the decade of the oil crisis. And I think coming off the oil crisis, the education of architecture was really focusing a lot about how to be sustainable in terms of designing buildings. There was a lot of focus on focusing on passive strategies.
Right.
So that leads on to being contextual in around the globe where you are, and also regionalism. And I think this sort of built up to a situation where, as we were graduating from the schools, we were very focused on designing with a very sustainable, very resilient sort of a mindset. And then the 90s was the 80s and the 90s was where I think cheap oil came about.
Right.
And I think also with the ascent of Dubai, the Middle East, and also China, architecture somewhat changed and became more about consumption. I think people were talking about luxury a lot.
Right.
And also about look at me kind of buildings. Sort of corporations wanted to build skyscrapers. Let's be taller. Let's, form for form's sake, look at me kind of buildings. And I think that's changed somewhat. It was the time of the star architects, and that caught on quite a lot. Something that we're not quite comfortable with, and that over the decades we kept to what we would taught and what we believe, doing sustainable architecture and so forth. And in the turn of the century, things starting to change a little bit. I think it was beginning, or rather the world was beginning to realize that all this consumption had a price on the planet.
Right.
The global crisis in terms of climate change was sort of being made quite apparent then. And I think that's where us persisting in this direction of doing sustainable, resilient design became, highlighted again. And I think that's where we persisted, and riding along the changes, we became fashionable.
So did you feel out of fashion in the 80s and 90s?
Oh, certainly. I think we were the odd people out, and when we did give lectures in the States and all, people didn't quite understand us, and they thought we were the funny architects who put greenery, trees on buildings.
Right.
And we were in the we started looking at putting landscaping, we call it integrated greenery, trees on buildings almost 25 years ago.
Right.
That was really quite a strange thing for people, and they couldn't understand whether we were architects or landscape designers.
Wow. Okay.
But for us, it's a very natural evolution in our thinking, and that we wanted to move towards a regenerative kind of architecture.
Right.
And that nature has a very big part to do with it. And that's why we incorporated landscaping in our buildings.
Right.
And I think now it has become mainstream globally. People put trees on buildings because they can't think of anything else to do. But for us, it's a little bit more to it. We like the idea of being nature positive,
Right.
and also being regenerative, because landscape does a lot to us, and we don't quite realize this until now. I think the science is evolving. There's things like ecosystem services that nature does for us. It actually, nature does I think it does things like produces oxygen for us.
Yes, sure.
It's cleanse the pollutants in the air, keep our cities cooler. So many things like this are what the ecosystem services of landscaping actually does for us. It basically just regulates the quality of air and temperature.
Yes.
And it's so essential to us.
Yes.
And I think we didn't realize this, and we keep sort of this we continue to sort of consume without regards to nature, and we sort of destroyed a lot of nature, and then that has caused this imbalance, which is climate change, really.
Fantastic. So WOHA is known for its innovative and sustainable architectural kind of designs. Could you tell us about a few of the projects that you guys have undertaken that exemplify this commitment to sustainability and also the kind of transformation that it's brought about?
Okay. Maybe I will just touch on a few. Park Royal Collection on Pickering is quite an obvious one. And I think this one has gone it has achieved sort of quite international reputation. I think it was the first building that looks visually very green.
Yes.
And for that building, we achieved a 250% green replacement. That is 2.5 times of the site area as greenery.
Wow.
And what people didn't know in the beginning, it was us trying to smuggle in the idea of trying to push the boundaries a little bit, and also at the same time trying to emulate someone, the Chiang Hong Lim, who the name was given to Hong Lim Park eventually.
Right.
He contributed at 1876 $3,000 to convert it into a park for workers. We wanted to match this generosity of this man.
Yes.
And but of course we are not going to give up our site to turn to green. But we were sort of replicating the same area of the park, Hong Lim Green, as to into the building as sort of Sky Gardens and Sky Park. And I think this became quite visible. And I think when people go around to that building or Hong Lim Green, you get to see it very well.
Yes.
You have this funny avatar landscape where greenery seems to float in the sky.
Yes.
And I think that's something that I think for us is one of the ideas of creating multiple ground levels.
Right.
Where we think it's possible to replicate ground level, where we plant trees, where we walk horizontally up in the sky. And then that's one of the ways we try to overcome the land limitation in Singapore and for the meta cities. We want cities to get more compact, not expanding, and take up more land where it would have been better off remaining as nature.
Right.
And this is something that we're building towards, is creating a more compact sort of high-rise, high-density, but equally high amenities in our cities and our buildings. So this is one of the strategies, and I think Park Royal Pickering was a very good example. Ever since then, we also have others as well. We had the SOTA, School of the Arts, which I think is a very interesting one for us because it's a public school. Though it's specialized in nature and the arts, it's an inner city.
Yes.
But because of a very effective a cross ventilation in the building, which was intended to be, so that we can keep it cool, keep it very pleasant. The exchange of air in the classroom is more than the schools outside the city.
Wow.
And the students actually have more oxygen and they're more alert.
Wow.
So we take a bit of credit for the students doing so well in the school.
Fair enough.
But the fact is, I think design matters.
Yes.
And I think our strength really is about integrating systems. And the systems I'm talking about is environmental systems, whether they're green, which is for landscape, blue for water, or public spaces into our buildings. We seamlessly integrate them into what we call architecture. And I think that really sets us apart from a lot of architects in the world. And I think it's beginning to show the profession that's a different way of designing.
Yes. That's, fascinating, actually. We could talk about that for quite a long time. But, going back to when you were talking about your journey and listening to your passion about this, you said a little bit that some people thought you were a bit mad in maybe the 80s and the 90s. How did you cope with that? Was that just kind of you just stubbornness and you just kind of stay with it? How do you cope with that sort of challenge where you see a real need for change, but perhaps the people that you're trying to influence don't necessarily see it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess for us it was a little bit of a evolution. We didn't from day one realize what we're doing or this is what we want to do. But as we sort of worked through our designs and through the years, we kind of become more focused and more aware of what we're doing. And I think keeping to a very focused and sort of a targeted direction, we were able to sort of direct our architectural design into a stronger belief and ideals, and then keeping very sort of tight with it, and that not wavering with regards to our deals. And sometimes it means losing clients too.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes clients in the 90s and the turn of century doesn't quite believe in it, and because they think it's for our own good and it's for the ego of the architect they were doing it. But we think that it was not for ourselves. The buildings that we design is going to stay around longer than ourselves anyway. Yeah. So it's really for future generation. There's one term I like to use is that we like to be good ancestors.
Right.
And we think it's necessary for us to design our actions must do good for future generations, not for our current generations. And I think that's the problem of the world today. Most decisions in the past were made from with very short-term thinking.
Yes.
And it's not about the long-term thinking that needs to consider the impact it has on the planet. And I think for us, that long-term thinking underpins most of our projects. Yeah, we were thought as being silly and funny when we tried to put trees on buildings.
Mad,
in fact. And in fact, even during school, I drew trees in my buildings.
Right.
And I think even during the schooling days, people thought it was weird. I almost drew forests on buildings. And
So you
I
saw
think,
it from as early as that?
yeah, I think we all did. I think with Richard Hessel, too, the other co-founder of WOHA, he too had such a penchant for landscaping and nature that we were both a perfect fit to do something like this. And it's really funny. We even gave a lecture in Harvard, and the people were scratching their head and wondering what we were doing. But I guess persisting all this year, now we are into almost 30 over years in our profession, I think people have come to realize, hey, there is more to it than just these silly architects putting trees on buildings.
That's fascinating.
It's such an interesting...
And for us now, it's about how many trees we can put in. and actually, one very good example is WOHA Hotel Downtown,
Yes.
where it's that red building with the green. Initially, when it's red, it was a little bit phallic, right? But we always knew that they were all going to be covered in green.
Yes.
And that the red would only be peeping through, little flowers in the landscape.
Yeah.
And that was really the intent, was to have the entire building clad in green. But if you sort of measure the surface temperature of that building, WOHA Hotel Downtown, and then you measure that of an equivalent, Tanjong Pagar Center. Tanjong Pagar Center, the surface temperature would be 45 to 50 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
And WOHA Hotel Downtown would be between 25 to 30.
Wow.
Almost half.
Yeah.
So one building absorbs the sun and radiates the heat.
Yes.
Our building absorbs the sun, converts it into energy for the plants, and absorbs your heat.
Gosh.
So you feel cooler when you
Yes.
walk next to it, or
Yes.
when you're in the building. It also saves a lot of energy in the air because it's a very good insulation. So it does. I mean, we weren't quite aware of it when we first did it. We didn't have the science to back us up, nor the technology to measure it. But now we have. And whereas interesting for us is that we are evolving this architecture that's a little bit science-based, that helps to justify the last 30 years of work, I guess. And it's just interesting. Then we kind of now sort of evolve it into a series of indexes and matrices, which is covered in our book, Garden City, Mega City,
Yes.
where the intention was really to help cities transform, using these indexes to measure and to sort of improve, and also to target where you want to get, you know, in terms of like how much green replacement we want in the city that we know has got a lot of benefits, or how much water we want to put back in the city or absorbs into the ground so that we don't have this flooding as much as many cities are now experiencing.
Yeah.
So these are some of the transformative indexes and matrices that we covered in this book. And this book that we did, Garden City, Maker City, was something that we felt was right after the Harvard lecture, where we felt it was really important and necessary for us to explain to people we are not those silly guys who put trees on buildings, and that there was more to it. And that's where we took 5 years to pen down all our ideas and our strategies into a book, where we wanted it to be a textbook for students in design, in architecture, urban design or city planning, and also for decision makers or policy makers as well. Trying to explain in actually quite simple terms, and something that we felt was we wanted to share with everyone. It was a knowledge we felt needed
Open
to be
source.
that everyone needs to know, so that it benefits the profession and benefits cities and it benefits the world, particularly with the tropical region. And we are based here in Singapore, a land-limited country, and 40% of the world's population live in the tropics.
Yeah.
And because the architectural discourse and discussion is really very Western, very focused in America and Europe, not so much in Asia and in the tropics. And we felt it was necessary for us to kind of participate and lead this discussion. Hence this book, where we wanted people to know. And we've been sending it around to mayors and to universities, and we give out freely to students who visit us. And it has pretty good results, I think. A couple of mayors wrote back to us and congratulated us on the book, and and said that this was very useful for them. But also some cities like Taichung has changed some of their policies to based on this book and based on our architecture of how to turn cities. Taichung is a very industrial city.
Yes.
And they wanted to make it more livable. And they Googled who are the livable architects and who are the green architects. Green being sort of represents livability in it. And our name popped up like this. And then they invited us for an exhibition, then led on to a cooperation between the industry, the academia, and the government. And we were able to evolve a building to demonstrate how it could benefit the city. And then that led on to changes in the policies to encourage more of such buildings. And so this success too had some success in other cities as well. And I think it's going to continue to have some impact. And I think that's something we are very happy that the book has managed to do that. And I think for us, a lot of our direction and our focus now is really about advocating change, and also at the same time teaching and mentoring the young minds. It takes almost 10 years to design and execute a building. And by right, my career is in 30 years, I should have done only 3 buildings, right? So there's not many opportunities or the time to actually do a lot to demonstrate it. But I think it's important for us to share our knowledge and to pass on this knowledge to students, to people who are interested, and particularly in the universities. And that's where we are focusing a little bit on, and hence we do teach in the universities and do try to advocate a new direction in architecture.
Fantastic, that's great to hear. So, Mun Summ, technology pretty much pervades pretty much every industry today. So how is technology kind of impacting change in the sustainable design practices that you guys...
This is a topic that we're all grappling with, isn't it? Particularly with AI. But the reality is for buildings, for architecture and city planning, it's a very complex, multiple disciplinary, there's so many layers to it. It's not so easy to transform and change. I mean, for example, the lifts. The lift was invented in the 1850s, I think. And today, the lifts remain fairly the same.
Right.
You know, it hasn't really evolved much.
Right.
Other things too that are sort of hinders the implementation of technology are safety concerns, regulations need to change. But nevertheless, I think we are sort of in the cusp of a time where robotics and AI will have quite an impact on technology. And I think I was just Googling yesterday to ChatGPT, how could it improve my life by making my job easier? And it did give me some suggestions. And I think that is quite an interesting thing that you could chat to the computer and ask them to give us solutions. And I think that's where I think it would be interesting time the next couple of decades. I think the rollout of technology takes time in our profession and also to be accepted as well. But I certainly think that the change will sort of be more V-shaped rather than sort of straight. And I think that's something that I think we can look forward to. Not sure we have the answers yet. Sometimes the answer is not in technology, but it's the way we put things together. Absolutely. And our architecture isn't new or anything. It's the way we have rethought how to put things together. So there wasn't so much a breakthrough in technology, but it was the way we sort of integrated and rethought some of the typologies we are so used to.
Just as a follow-up to that, would you say today you've got models, like you mentioned the indices that you've developed to measure and benchmark the kind of performance of these buildings. is it easier today with models that allow you to kind of model out the kind of, the kind of ecological or climate impact your buildings would have before you actually build them? Is that playing any kind of role?
Actually, that's what ChatGPT told me.
Oh.
But it's something that we do know.
This is
that-
Charanjit.
Yes. Something we do know. There's this what you call an architectural twin.
Okay.
And even cities are now, like Singapore is one of
Digital twins,
the ones that are most advanced in doing a replica of Singapore digitally.
Yes.
And
Gosh,
I
wow.
think they are, it is actually easier to manipulate something on a virtual world than to say, get down to the ground to try and do things, because of the reality of the difference in scale. But I think there is this ability now to put it all on a digital platform and to simulate and also to see how you can make changes before you apply it in the ground and in the real thing. So I think there is a huge potential, and Singapore certainly seems to be one of the forefront in this field.
I think we've legislated the compulsive submission of BIM models for every new building,
that's
right?
causing quite a bit of pain
Is
for
it?
us.
Oh.
It's quite a laborious task. It's not
Yes.
as if it's so easy, but it's a laborious in the sense that we do need to follow certain standards
Yes.
and certain very specific direction to model it, so that you can actually able to use it across a bigger platform, across various disciplines, even for operators and users at the end, rather than us designing it and then executing it, but people who really at the end of the day uses it. So I think that's very interesting for us, because I think we are asked to look at, not just when we are looking at designing a building, but also the end state of the building. If there is an end state, I do hope that buildings can last for as long as we can. But if there's an end state, that it could also then be dismantled, and then recycled in a circular manner. And I think that's the kind of I think the direction and the end game for this system.
Cool.
I'm fascinated to talk to you about people.
It's always the problem, isn't it?
Well, what you were saying in terms of your interactions with people, and I'm sure that territory could be talked around a lot. But I can imagine, at one level, some of the work that you're doing clearly is with probably people 50 plus, 60 plus, in very, very senior, private sector or government sector roles, and talking to them about the concept of sustainability and design sustainability. But then you're also saying that you're teaching young people, and I can imagine their take on what you're talking about being completely different. Is that fair? How do you convince the older generation, I guess maybe a bit like myself, to buy into this concept when they've grown up in a society? I think to a large extent, a lot of it has been around consumption, versus this younger generation who, clearly their future is about trying to fix a lot of the problems that the previous generation has created.
I think you're spot on. I think the more mature sort of a generation are so used to consumption, and to change their habits may be a little bit difficult. Where I think it is very necessary for us to influence and educate the younger generation, and even very small kids. And I think what is really quite good is that small kids can tell their parents to change, and they would change,
Yes.
And I think it's proven that small little kids can tell off their parents, and then tell them what's a better way to do it, and our parents would kind of change. And I think that's where I think there is hope in trying to influence and educate the younger ones. And then I think the more mature ones, I think, do need to be coaxed along to make the change, but I think it's going to be a little bit hard. They're not going to give up their comfort, you know. They won't be giving up their cars to ride a bus, say, for one. And I think that's going to be hard. And I think, but I think that's where I think technology makes a difference. Technology can maybe leapfrog into the future a little bit. And I think that's where I think it's interesting to identify the kind of technology that will help us sort of navigate this very short period of time that we have in transforming ourselves into, or rather transforming ourselves, our habits, so that, you know, there'll be a future for mankind, for humanity. And I think technology, I think, can result in major changes. Say, for example, with autonomous vehicles, robotics, and things like that. I think it actually can and integrating with, of course, clean energy and all that, and make it sort of really sexy. And that's what Tesla has done.
Yes.
It's really a very sexy product, right?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
a lot of diehard sort of car
Fanboys.
you know, owners and fans of the automobile, you know, see it as something. Oh, this is new. This is something I want. And I think you can even go further, where the whole car itself can be made of PV panels. Say there is already in the market 2 or 3 of such cars, but they haven't scaled up and rolled out yet. But the future of cars can be small, autonomous, remote sort of batteries itself.
Yes.
And when you plug them together, would be the energy storage for the city or district. And I think that's kind of innovative thinking, the transformative quality of it that will leapfrog in the future, may be the solution. But for us, you know, depending on us old fogey to make the change now, I think that's going to be a bit hard.
Because we don't like change.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We
are too set in our ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought your point about kids convincing their parents.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the marketing world, there's
Yeah.
always been this concept
Yeah.
of pester power.
Yeah.
They describe it as pester power.
Yes.
Where kids, pester their parents to buy a brand
Yes.
or whatever. And the idea of kids convincing their families to change the way they live.
I've
and
seen
consume.
little kids in a supermarket telling their parents, to choose a certain product over the other one because the kid was reading the labels, and the parents just picking out things that they were used to.
yeah.
And I think it does matter. I think
Yeah.
it will make a difference with education.
Yeah, fantastic.
That actually is a nice segue into what we're talking about, the future. So what are your hopes for the future of sustainable design, particularly in Asia?
Okay, Asia is going to be tough because I think Asia has, the most populous part of the world, and also I think they are not as advanced as maybe the Western world. So I think, but having said that, I think Asian cities are used to change.
Right.
The way I think even like China, the transformation with China is very quick.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the very fact that China was the one that really produced solar panels cheaply and in large quantities also made it possible for the world to implement solar farms and clean energy in a very big way. And I think Asia has the resolve, I think, to do that. Between China and India, I think these two superpowers, I think if they get the strategies right and not focusing on short-term policies and think long-term, I think it is possible for us to get to a place where we can control climate change.
Fascinating. Very big thought.
It's a very what makes a difference would be next, say, 10 to 25 years. And we kind of the people who created the problem.
Totally.
And we will probably going to be able to see whether or not we're going to succeed in saving humanity or not. So
Yes.
we will get to realize at the end whether we've done good or bad.
Yeah, sure. God, yeah. The next 25 years are going to be very difficult for us, I think.
I'm not even looking forward to it, to be honest.
Charan,
Scary.
any sort of closing thoughts on Mun Summ's perspective?
I think I'd love to hear, if Mun Summ has any final word to share with us before we close off this conversation.
I guess my final words. I guess we have one life. We have one planet.
Indeed.
And I think the aggregate of all of us, if we are united people, I think we will be able to save humanity. That would be my final thought.
Let's see.
I'm
Charan,
looking forward to it.
yes.
Fingers crossed.
Any final thoughts from you? I've got one thought in
Go
my
ahead,
mind.
man, Richard.
Yeah.
Please do.
I hope this is okay for me to say. I think your concept of good ancestors is it's an incredibly Asian way of thinking about what's important. And it's so, I think it's probably okay for me to say as well, it's so non-Western way of thinking. And actually from a future perspective, it's exactly what we need to be thinking about, don't we? We need to be kind of taking ownership for the impact that we will have on future generations. And that concept, I think, is something that would really resonate across Asia, which is actually kind of why we're doing this podcast in the first place, trying to grab ideas that can make the future better from an Asian perspective. I think we've had enough of Western perspectives for the last 50 plus years, It's the Asian take on the future that I think is most interesting. I really like this. I visually see that thought. Good ancestors. It's a really powerful thought, I think.
Compelling, indeed.
Yeah.
My reflection on this is really about how there's not one approach to solving the problem. It's not just about the people or the technology or, being green or being sustainable, but it's about bringing all of these elements together in the right direction and kind of charting out a vision and then delivering on that promise as well. And I think that's how you solve difficult challenges. And this is not something that's simple or easy to solve. And I think we need thinking like that, and we need leaders like yourself and visionaries like yourself to show us the way as well. So thank you for all of that insight. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for Season 1 of the TransformAsians podcast. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What would you like us to talk about, and who would you like us to interview in Season 2 that will be coming up soon? And in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in Season 2. Thank you.